Hey, Emma.
Yes, Madelyn.
What do you call it when an organization brings together the best of the best for searching the bottom of the sea for treasure?
I don't know. What do you call it?
League of Dredgens. Hello and welcome to Talk This.
It's dangerous to podcast alone.
I'm your spooky rock in the ocean host, Madelyn.
I'm your I'll take the jungle path host.
And thanks for tuning in to this week's show. This week, we're talking about League of Legends and Dredge. My alternate joke, well, two alternate jokes, real quick, two joke outtakes. Because my boyfriend was really trying to convince me that dredge is also a word that means to, like, sprinkle flour on something before you fry it. Okay, sure, chef. It does mean that, but I didn't think you would get it, so...
It sounds familiar. I'm smart. I know words.
Okay. And then I was going to use one that was just like, you know, what do my opening jokes make you do? LOL. Haha. But people would just say, yeah. They do.
Obviously. Every single time.
Which is a statement.
True.
So, Emma, are you ready to jump into League of Legends? Famously big League of Legends players.
Heck yeah, we love League of Legends here.
We play a lot of MOBAs at Talk This.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so League of Legends, maybe you've heard of it, is a 2009 multiplayer online battle arena, which MOBA is not an acronym that I hold what it actually stands for in my head.
Yeah.
Along with the Italian BMT at Subway, an acronym that I do not hold the meaning of.
Bacon, meat, and tomatoes?
False. Learned today that it was biggest, meatiest, tastiest.
What?
Or someone's pulling my leg.
Okay.
But it doesn't have bacon on it, so I don't know what the B would be if not biggest,
right.
meatiest, tastiest. Anyway, right. League of Legends is the biggest, meatiest, tastiest MOBA in the game. From Riot. Available on PC and Mac.
Yes, there is also, they've released a mobile version of it called Wild Rift.
But if you're serious about League, you probably aren't playing Wild Rift.
Right, yeah. Yes.
It was inspired by another acronym. I didn't even realize Dota was an acronym, to be perfectly honest. I'm trying to set the stage here for the level of familiarity with this.
I theoretically knew that Dota was an acronym because it's all caps, you know, but I did not know what it stood for.
It stood for Defense of the Ancients, and embarrassingly, it took me a while. Like, I opened that, I was like, oh, interesting, what's that? On the Wikipedia page. Only to then get about a third of the way down and be like, oh, Defense of the Ancients.
Yeah.
But if you like me are not familiar with Dota, it was originally a custom Warcraft 3 map that made like a MOBA, basically. Yes. And they wanted to make a standalone game, and they sure did.
Well, League was made by a lot of people who liked the mod. There was also a team from people who made the mod that actually went on to make real Dota games, because that's a series that's ongoing as well. That their first real game that wasn't a mod released around the same time as League, actually. So the two sort of pioneers in the MOBA game space.
So you're saying two teams of people went head to head?
Yeah.
On a battlefield?
Exactly, yeah. It was like its own little MOBA. You're right.
So if you're not familiar with the actual gameplay of League, what it looks like is you got two teams of 5 that are basically playing like sort of capture the flag, kind of.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
You don't have to bring the flag back like in Capture the Flag. You just have to destroy the flag.
Yes.
There's so much about League that I did not know. I think of League of Legends as like, I don't know, I think of all of the online fighty esports games as kind of the same in my head. This is not my world.
Right.
And so it was interesting to learn about what League of Legends sort of like actually is, as someone whose only real experience with it is watching Arcane.
Yeah. So basically what it is you have 5v5 battles of players that each have like a half of the map, like you said, and your goal is to essentially go over to the enemy base and destroy their nexus in order to win the game. And each of the players can pick a different champion. League has tons and tons and tons of champions now. They've continued to, add more as the game's life cycle has gone on.
Almost 200 now.
Yeah. These champions have, different roles that they can maintain. This might be familiar for any other sort of team multiplayer game, as you play different roles, and they'll take different areas of the map depending on what sort of that champion's role is and how you're playing it. So there's a few different lanes that you can take. You can play like support, or you can go in the jungle. was one of the roles.
So let me explain that. I have a fun little diagram of the map in front of me. So it's kind of like, you can see, imagine it's like a square, right? And at the top right and the bottom left corners, you've got the bases for each team with the nexus. And then there's 3 lanes, right? There's kind of lanes along the outside of the perimeter of the square, and there's a lane through the middle. And in the triangle sections between those lanes, you've got the jungle. And so traditionally, apparently, the sort of like classic 5-player, like team positioning, right, is that one person goes in each lane, or something, maybe with a second person in one of the lanes, and then somebody like Emma goes into the jungle to kill some monsters. Yeah, I mean, I'm sure we'll get into the esports of it all later, but it was fascinating to me to look at all of this. It makes total sense to me how this game, I mean, with the caveat of like things blow up in ways that I wouldn't have ever guessed any game would make $2 billion a year, right?
Right.
But with that caveat aside, it makes total sense why this game is like a huge esport. It like just is like football, basically. That's so wrong. That's such it. But it reads to me as like, oh, this is a sport. Like, you've got a team. There are positions.
Yeah.
In a way that like Fortnite does not.
League is also pretty unique and notable in good and bad ways of being sort of a pioneer of a games as a service and a free-to-play model as well. So when it released, it was actually it still is a free-to-play game. And that's sort of, I was reading like a Washington Post retrospective of the creation of League, and they said like, they went back and forth on whether they wanted to do that a lot towards the end, but that's what they credit with them getting a lot of players off of the Dota that also came out around that time, because that was a paid game. You would buy it and then play it, versus League where you have the free to play and then you can buy skins and stuff like that. So that seems like, choosing the free-to-play model is what enabled their success and their ability to get off the ground.
And yeah, it's important to remember that was really a trailblazing thing in 2009, especially for a game targeting a Western audience.
Mm-hmm.
So there was a lot of skepticism around that from, stakeholders and outside parties.
They couldn't find a publisher that would publish it because it wasn't a model that was understood yet.
So it's interesting to sit here, just 15 years later, and I feel like so much of the conversation is the opposite of that now, right? It's free to play is a less sustainable model. You've got to be charging people up front for something.
Yeah.
So they really pioneered that, and we've really sort of speed run into the ground over the past 15 years.
Yeah. Although, like, it is interesting to also look at League with that in mind, because their big 10th anniversary thing was announcing a lot of more single, experience things. Of course, Arcane came out, and that's the television show on Netflix. But they've also been releasing and are working on more, like, single-player, one-time purchase games using their characters and the lore that they've created over the past decade and a half or so. So even that, like, they're pioneering the games as service space as they've gone on, like, at their 10-year mark, they were like, okay, but now we can really, like, make like story games,
Yeah.
Because they like, for all of the fact that gameplay in League is just like, you pick a character that looks cool, and maybe they have a cool voice lines, and they have established powers and stuff. But over the years, like, all those characters have, like, lore and relationships and, like, thought process gone behind them of, like, what their story is. And there's a whole world that these characters exist in. There's different countries. They've created this whole thing that doesn't really reflect in, the main mode of League. But they can take that and use it and make, like, they have a card game that's like Wizards. What's Wizards? Magic the Gathering. It's Wizards of the Coast is the creator. They have, like, a virtual card game where you can get all these characters on cards and get lore. They just released, like, Ruined King, which is, like, a turn-based role-playing game. I think a game about Echo just came out. That's some sort of, like, puzzle game that uses his, like, time powers. So they're expanding, anding, for sure. And that's not even getting into, like, their music stuff as well.
Yeah. I wish I could have been a fly on the wall on, originally League didn't have a lot of story behind it at all. Like, each character had, like, a 1-paragraph bio. They didn't have any writers. That, like, was not the thing. And I would love to, like, hear more about the thought process. They eventually, like, they hired a guy from Warhammer, and they made, like, a conscious decision that they were going to sort of start crafting more of this lore, which seems, in hindsight, like, obviously a great decision, right? People get really into that. It's a great way to suck people in to a game that, and I say this with, like, this isn't my bag, but whatever. Like, it could be kind of repetitive, right? Obviously, each game is different, right? Like basketball games are kind of repetitive, right? Like, I get it.
Yes.
But, like, it's a great way to sort of keep people in that ecosystem, but you don't have to change your game at all. Like, it must be a fascinating writing gig there, because all you're doing is creating, like, how do I sticky people to this game so they stay and they want to buy cool skins for this character.
I mean, it definitely is, like, an appeal towards a different audience as well that might want to try it and get into it, because it's another, like, attachment point. Like, people who are really into just playing League might pick a champion based on the meta of whatever is good right now.
Yeah.
But if someone's just trying it out, they might be like, oh, I watched Arcane.
Yeah.
I wonder if that's infuriating, actually.
Like, probably. I feel like it has to have passed now. When season 2 comes, I'm sure the real League players will be pissed about it.
But just things having stories and stuff like that is, like, a way for someone who's curious to be like, oh, this person seems neat. Or at least, it would be if Riot could ever figure out how to fix its problem.
Haven't
its toxicity
they, like,
problem.
Aren't they a company? Maybe I'm wrong about this. Tell me if I'm wrong about this. But I feel like I had seen that they had at least, like, seemingly taken baby steps forward at Riot.
Yes. Yes, there's their company toxicity and League toxicity is two different issues, for one thing. Yes, so there was an expose on Riot in, like, 2018, 2019 on the sort of its leadership structure. They used to have policies of you have to be, like, a really big League player to work, and rise up through the ranks. They've gotten rid of that. Either leadership used to be all men, now it's about like a quarter women. So they've made, that's over like
it's a step forward.
4 years,
sure.
4 or 5 years, yeah. So they're making genuine steps to improve themselves, at least. There's obviously still problems. You'll see things come up every once in a while, but they do seem like they've taken the sort of criticism to heart and are trying to make steps forward.
But you're right, the toxicity in the game, I mean, at some point, I don't know what year this is from, but I'm sure it could only be worse. The Anti-Defamation League did a survey that said that about 3/4 of players had experienced in-game harassment, which seems low to me. And it's fascinating that Riot's strategy for, like, there's been some weird strategies about how to cope with this. Like for the first half of League's history, they seem to have had, like, they trying to crack down on this. And one way they tried to crack down on this was through a tribunal system, where, like, basically they had players acting as volunteer judges and mods.
Yeah.
Which is nutty for a game that makes the kind of money that this makes, for that to be the system. But, like, over the last 5 or 6 years or so, they seem to have sort of, like, thrown up their hands a little. I mean, not that they're doing, like, nothing, but they've thrown up their hands a little bit on eliminating the toxic part, and instead are just trying to incentivize good behavior, which is fascinating.
Although I was reading their update from this May, they've actually instituted a system where if you've been punished for disruptive behavior, you're actually going to be banned from rank play for a while. You can go into other queues that aren't ranked. This is like not like for, this is on top of other disciplinary actions. So if you're doing like hate speech, you get like banned from everything. You don't just get banned from ranked. But if you're doing more like disruptive actions and they take action against you, you can get blocked from actually playing ranked at all for a little while. Which they acknowledge, like, oh, they could go into other queues and cause problems there, but they think that ranked is uniquely, pressurized to cause people to be toxic, because that, like, ranked is like when you move up and down the actual rankings of League, and if you want to be like a serious pro player, you have to move up in ranked, right? So for some people, that stuff really matters, and they can get upset about things if games aren't going their way, to put it mildly.
Yeah. So they do have an honor system where you can give people, like, medals for being nice, basically, and they get rewarded with free loot boxes over time. But it is, I mean, it's a testament to how pervasive and how challenging this problem is in online gaming spaces, that, again, this game that makes somewhere between $1 billion to $2 billion every year probably made more. I bet you they made more than that during the pandemic. I don't know. The numbers I was seeing were pre-pandemic. I bet you they made more than that in 2020, 2021. That even on this scale, at a game where, like, part of its reputation is it's toxic and horrible, and you'd hope that, like, they would be incentivized to fix that. That it's really hard to root out. Yeah.
There is a little breakdown on Kotaku from 2015 on, like, why League is sort of, the way it's designed is sort of unavoidably creating a lot of places where arguments can happen, from the very first, like, choosing a champion, right? Because you get 5 people on your team. The different areas of the map require different sort of types of champions or skill sets or whatever. And so if you get 2 people that really just like playing one thing, then you're already having an argument among your team at the character select screen, because they both want to play the same role, right?
Yeah.
And so that ends up causing issues with your team. And then as it keeps going, if the way that it works of, like, splitting your team up, sort of, if, like, one person is really doing badly, that also is obvious, right? I think there's other teams, sort of esports, where, on a more casual level, if one person's not doing well, it's maybe not as obvious as it would be in League. And then if you already have communication issues, that causes more issues in the mid and late game stages. And then, like, in the post game, it's really easy to be like, instead of, like, the example they gave is like, everybody's typing GG and someone just types no. Is that they're looking for a fight, essentially. So it's really easy to get into an argument there, too. So it just seems like a lot of the stages of the game, like, if you get off at a bad foot, it's hard to recover from that. It just gets worse as the game goes on. Usually among the team members that are on the same team, more even than teams against each other.
Something I didn't realize about League, because I feel like, I don't know, most of my kind of conscious knowledge of these kind of like very popular online games is like MMORPGs. I didn't realize that like your you can't upgrade your character in a lasting way. Like you can get items during the game, but everyone starts on an E. So like if I happened to be like a League prodigy, I could jump in and be awesome.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't have to grind for like years to catch up.
Yeah, part of each match is leveling your character, essentially. So you spend like the early game leveling up your character before you really get into like the attacking phase, which is interesting for sure.
It's also fascinating that they managed to make a ton of money before they did too much character or anything. Like all of the money is for cosmetics. It's the loot box that everybody wants, everybody asks for in games, right? It's the ideal loot box. It wasn't even loot boxes until 2016. It was just purchasable cosmetics. Mm-hmm. But it is like, it's the exact thing that everybody asks for in every game. And here it is. Your loot boxes that are purely just money grabs. Just cool factor.
Yeah.
Cool vibes. And apparently, I who knows if this is still true, but long ago, there was some beef with Ubisoft where they were like, almost no one's buying cosmetics for this game. Like, the only way they're making money is because there's so many players. And it's like, man, I don't think that's the insult you think it is.
Yeah.
Like, it was a nice try, but you're right. Nice. Speaking of like tons and tons and tons of people, again, this whole episode, or this whole half of this episode, is just like things in gaming that a lot of people like, but I don't engage with, really.
Well, it's hard to talk about League because it's become such a, franchise, right? It's not just this MOBA game anymore. It's become like this extremely spread out thing that touches on multiple industries. I mean, we're not even really going to get into like the KDA stuff. They made like a K-pop band essentially out of.
They have several fake bands. I mean, KDA obviously is the
KDA is the only one that's like particularly active, is what I seem to see. The other ones seem to be more like they released like a song.
Still. But the esports stuff, man, it's baffling. Whenever I look at the numbers for esports, I'm like, I feel like I'm the New York Times. You know what I mean?
I've never played Tetris.
Like,
never heard of Tetris before.
Millions of people play games every year. But like, it's hard to overstate how like popular League of Legends esports is. Like, It is the esport, especially in light of the news this week that Overwatch League seems to be just like maybe going to go away. Like, League is well, for context, right, from 2016, more people watched the League of Legends finals than watched like the World Series, which is like, who do I know? Like, that means that I know people who are watching this.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Which is, that's weird. It's still weird to me that, like, when I encounter people and they're like, I'm playing video games sometimes. It's not. That's an exaggeration. But it's like, man, like, you are watching people play League of Legends?
Yeah.
And they've got, like, a sports league. Sorry, again, I do sound like the New York Times right now. I'm sorry. I own this. I recognize this is something that I should probably be more aware of. Because, like, people are making scary money on this. But it's still wild to me. Where did this come from? How did this happen?
Yeah.
I don't even know where to go. Like, there's so many things I could go to. It's like, do I talk about the stuff with China? Do I talk about KDA? Here's where I'll go. It's a Wikipedia greatest game of all time.
That makes sense.
No surprise.
It is certainly influential.
It's a genre definer for sure.
Yeah. But yeah, you mentioned China. Riot is like 97%, 98% owned by Tencent.
They weren't in the beginning though, right? Like
they were purchased pretty fast was my impression from
Gotcha.
reading they watched it in post article. I don't remember if it said exactly when. But it seems like its free to play made it particularly popular in Asia when it came out. So I guess Tencent was like, oh, cool.
There's a lot of like weird sort of push and pull with the China relationship. I mean, there's the usual. I mean, we also have the
2011.
Barbie. What?
They purchased 97% of Riot in 2011.
Okay, so like pretty fast, yeah.
Yeah.
So no, there's the usual, we all saw the Barbie movie controversy, right? About the 8-dash line or whatever.
Yeah.
There's the usual, like, oh, they censor certain, like, sensitive Chinese government words that kind of came out. And it's like, okay, par for the course for a $1 billion franchise. Sure. Yeah. But there was also, like, there's, like, practically rioting when the Chinese national team, or the Chinese team won the league championships. Like, people streaking in the streets, kind of.
Wow.
That's what I read. Like, that's crazy. That's wild. And then, China, I don't know if these restrictions came through or where this landed now, but for a while there was talk of restrictions where, children wouldn't be allowed to play more than an hour of video games a day. Mm-hmm. So there's real concern about the pipeline to successful league players who can't train up in their teenage years.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Well, their brains are elastic.
Yeah. I mean, again, I guess it's the same thing with sports, right? If you only played like an hour a day of baseball, that probably wouldn't get you ready for major league play.
Not exactly, no. Is League in the Olympics? What games are in the Olympics? Feels like they have to be, right? There's video games coming.
Very exciting.
Oh boy, oh boy.
Oh boy, oh boy.
Did researching this tempt you into getting into League of Legends?
No, not really. I have the Ruined King and I think the Echo games sitting on my Switch wish list waiting for when I have time to check them out, but I'm not particularly interested in any online game, to be fair. So there's that sort of barrier there. I'll watch season 2 of Arcane when it comes out.
Right. If you had 4 friends who are really into League, would you play it?
Sure. If I had 4 friends who were really into League and were like, hey, come try this out. Sure. Yeah, that's just a social event,
Okay. I wanted to feel out. I was like, how allergic to this,
Also, they're my friends, so ideally they wouldn't yell at me.
Well, I'm sure plenty, like, famous last words.
You're right.
How many people have said that entering a League game?
You're right,
They're my friends. They'll be nice to me. 5 minutes later, GG, no.
No.
Well, now for something completely different.
Yeah.
Dredge.
What do you mean? They're both about unspeakable horrors under the surface, right?
You're
Just
not
in
wrong.
one, it's someone calling you an awful word, and in the other, it's, monster fish.
Freaky fish. No, another genre definer, I would say. Right? Equally well-known genre.
Sure, yeah.
Dredge came out in March of this year. It's a fishing horror game, sort of / management sim, kind of.
Yeah.
From Black Salt Games, which is a New Zealand company, published by Team 17. Big Talk This Mashup energy.
Yeah.
Giant.
When last week when I was saying, I need the horror cooking genre, and you tore me down immediately. This is what I was talking about, okay? So you're wrong.
It's like I was trying to figure out what games we would have to put in to generate Dredge. Because at first I was like, oh, this is so funny. It's just sort of like the opposite of Spiritfarer, kind of. Not the opposite, but it's like Spiritfarer, but with a very different tone.
Yeah.
But I feel like if we took obviously if we took a real horror game and Spiritfarer, maybe. But a Cozy Grove Spiritfarer mashup feels like it could generate Dredge.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was surprised to not see more reviews talk about Spiritfarer. I thought that's an obvious comparison here, but whatever.
Not really, to be
honest.
honest.
It's on a boat. There's ghosts.
There's not really ghosts.
Okay, fair enough. Whatever.
More monsters.
I'm not saying they're the same game. I'm just saying people who enjoyed Cozy Grove might also enjoy this. I'm sorry, not Cozy Grove, Spiritfarer. Cozy Grove too, but Spiritfarer. Anyway, in Dredge, you're a fisher dude, and you see a help wanted ad for a town that wants a fisherman. Which is that?
You kind of just wake up on a dock. More specifically,
after a scene where it's we're looking for an angler.
Oh, I guess so.
Look, I maybe that doesn't happen. Maybe it was a spooky haunting. You do just kind of wake up on a dock. It's not clear the connection between those two scenes. But I did want to make a crack of is that something that happens? Or they're just help wanted, our town needs a fisherman?
Probably.
But I still thought it was kind of funny. Anyway, you wake up at the dock of Greater Marrow, probably marrow, like bones. Greater Marrow.
Yeah.
And the mayor is like, hey, your boat is all messed up, so I'm giving you a new boat, but you owe me money now.
It's $35, to be fair. It's $35.
Yeah.
He does not charge you very much for that boat.
Still, Tom Nook vibes, anybody? You've got a loan now. And so to pay off that loan, you've got to go fishing and sell some fish. And you sell some fish, you can upgrade your boat, there's a whole archipelago to explore and catch a bunch of fish. Also, there's some freaky stuff out there.
Yeah. The mayor initially warns you that you probably shouldn't, you should be back before nighttime. Right. But eventually, the fishmonger where you sell your fish will start giving you requests for fish to catch, and eventually be like, oh, these ones only are at night. So it starts encouraging you to go out at night. And then maybe at some point during your fishing, you will, accidentally, catch a strange, twisted, mutated version of a fish. And that's never good.
Except it is. They're worth a bunch of money.
You're right. You sell them for a lot.
So in the course of this fishing, I won't spoil this too much, but the next step, this happened, I got to this in the demo, so spoilers for 30 minutes in. You can meet a guy called the Collector, who is going to tell you he's looking for these sort of ancient relics throughout the archipelago. He wants your help finding them.
Yes.
And so the game kind of follows you doing that as you get better and better ships and catch more and more varieties of fish.
So you start around the Marrow area, but once you find the trinket that the Collector is looking for there, he gives you a haste ability where you can sort of boost your boat for short amounts of time so that you can get to sort of the other areas on the corners of your map within a day, right? And then you can explore those areas and find more trinkets for the collector and do other quests in those areas. And as you go, you're catching fish, you're selling fish, you're upgrading your equipment, so you're getting fishing rods that can fish in different areas or are better, like faster at pulling fish in. You can get crab pots that you can put down to catch crabs. You can get a net that you can put behind your boat so that you can sort of trawl for fish as you go. You can get lights, you can get better engines so you can go faster. And eventually you can start really upgrading your boat so you can have more slots for fishing rods or nets or whatever, or you can expand your boat to begin with. So it's really mostly about upgrading your boat is the main part of this game.
Yeah. It has what Polygon deems the spring's hottest game development trend, which is the Tetris inventory system. Spooky Tetris inventory system, specifically.
RE4 is back, baby.
Yeah, man. All these RE4 inspired takes on fitting stuff in your carry-on suitcase.
Heck yeah.
So you better like that kind of inventory management. This game is a spooky game, and I played the demo for this. I was about to stop. I was like, oh, I've got to stop and record the podcast. I'm just gonna give the collector this one thing, and then I'll stop. And it was like, you're done. I was like, oh, perfect timing. I did play the whole demo. But if that experience and the reviews are anything to go by, if you're coming to this looking for horror, you are in the wrong place.
Yeah.
It's spooky, and if you stay out at night, this panic meter fills, and you start to hallucinate things, and things start to get weird. But it's not scary.
Yeah.
So for some people, that may be oh, I'm much more interested in this now. And for some people, that may be oh, I'm much less interested in this now. But something to be aware of.
Yeah, I've been playing it. I got the game because I've been interested in playing it. And my experience with the monsters so far has been gah!
Yeah.
Startled more than scared. I saw a ghost ship at night, and I was like, what is that? Ah! And then it ran into me,
Nice.
And then in the first area I've gone to, there's a serpent that's sometimes swimming around that just catches me off guard behind me every single time. It passes by a certain spot in the morning, and I really need to not go to that spot every morning like an idiot. But I do anyway. And it just sneaks up behind you, and I've scuttled my ship 2 times from that. It's really strict about what counts as hitting against the rocks.
Oh, don't I know it? I enjoyed the demo more than I expected to. I'm tempted. It's on sale on Switch. It was on sale on Switch earlier this week.
Yeah, I think it's not on sale anymore.
Not on Sunday at noon.
No.
But if this were a few days earlier in the week, I might have just a few hours to decide if I wanted to buy it on sale on the Switch.
Yeah.
So it's a tough call, especially when Triangle Strategy is still sitting there staring at me. But I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it more than I expected to. I don't know why I enjoyed it more than I expected to. This does this sort of silly little
checklists, Madelyn.
I know.
You love a good checklist.
We're playing River City Girls a checklist now, which is embarrassing. We switched to we maxed out the girls, and now we're playing the boys. Anyway, so I'm a little tempted. I'm a little tempted by it. But it's interesting that this game has been firmly adopted into the cozy games canon, which does not seem to have been intentional by the creators.
It doesn't seem unintentional either.
Right.
They have implemented, I don't remember if it was at launch or a little bit after launch, but they have implemented a few modes that either make it so that certain monsters won't attack you or make the fishing mini games. They have little... when you're fishing, they have little mini games that mostly make the fishing go faster.
Yeah.
You can't really fail them. It just makes the fishing go faster or slower based on how you do. So you can lower the difficulty of that as well, I think is a couple of game modes there. And, like, there's some interviews where they've talked about, like, you don't have to go out at night, right?
Yeah.
You can play the game pretty much entirely without going out at night. So there's that as well. If you want to mostly pretty much avoid any spooky stuff, you do not have to engage with it if you don't want to.
It is interesting, though, this sort of, like, dark, cozy games as this, like, ascendant genre, right? Which is so interesting to me. It's interesting that in this, like, world that we live in right now, that a cozy game doesn't mean, like, actually cozy.
Yeah.
If that makes sense. Like, it's not cozy like I would describe anything else. It's like, oh, you have a manageable task list of things to do with no, like, real... Like, you can do them at the speed that you want to do them.
Yeah.
And, like, that's, like, how sad for all of us. That, like, the definition of a cozy game is no longer, like, it's cute. I mean, there's a certain art style, of course, that this falls into as well. That does go more along those lines, I guess. But it feels like the primary element of this emerged genre is, like, you can manageably get some understandable things done.
Yeah, and going a step further than that, there's something comforting about, like, playing a game where you're sort of eking out a living amidst the horrors.
Yeah.
You know?
You know, the developers, there's I don't know exactly where this, I think it's from, I can't remember if it's from Polygon or if it's from Waypoint where I was reading this, but they talked to the developers about this a little bit. And well, they said, like, oh, we were developing this, like, if you'd asked us if this was a cozy game or if fans of the cozy games would like this, we probably would have said no.
Mm-hmm.
But now, like, we kind of get it, right? That it's this idea of, like, you got to have that contrast, right? And we talked about this in our cozy games episode, the idea of the campfire, right? Like, you're in that space of warmth with the darkness around you.
Yeah.
And the darkness around you is an important element of that. Right. So you've got to have, like, you know, you can have the impression that, like, not everything is cozy, that makes the coziness more complete. Silly word when you say it that many times in a row.
Cozy?
Cozy.
Yeah, it is. Dredge had what sounds like a pretty admirable development cycle, though.
Oh, yeah?
I was reading about them talking about it, and they were just like, yeah, you know, we just sort of scoped everything out and did it. And it worked. It was like 3 years from the initial prototype, essentially. Pretty reasonable cycle to go through.
I mean, it's like a moderate size of game, right?
Yeah.
It sort of knows what it is. Doesn't try to be too much. And if you read the reviews, I mean, Dredge is a well-reviewed game, but you definitely see some folks who are like, okay, like, it eventually, like, you do get it eventually, right? Yeah. And, you know, I think in this sort of game, you know, why not shoot for the 12 hours and have more fish to do and give people who want more and more to do, even if it doesn't grow or change that much past a certain point. But, you know, that is the one drawback of the, like, healthy staying within your scope thing is you're going to get some reviews that are like, oh, but what if the scope was more?
Yeah. They did talk about, you know, they tried some features that they had cut. They were initially like, oh, maybe, you know, fuel management is something, and, like, they couldn't figure out a way to make it at all meaningful and also feel good because they're like, we don't really want the player to run out of fuel in the middle of the ocean and have that be a game over.
Yeah.
So they tried just making it go really slow, but that didn't feel good either. They talked about, you know, trying to manage the water simulation because they used to have it so the waves would push your boat, but they figured because that's like a they settled on time management, right? So if the waves can sort of push your boat around, you can sort of cheat that to let the waves sort of push you in the direction that you want to go or push you along without moving. So they ended up having it so that the waves don't like really push your boat anywhere. When you stop, you just stopped. But, you know, the waves do have a little bit of impact, so they had to make sure that, like, by the islands, it couldn't push your boat up at all, because then it could beach your boat accidentally, and you would be stuck. One of the monsters, they're thinking about having, like, a little harpoon minigame, where you'd shoot a harpoon at it a couple times to leave it alone. But then they were like, but then the players will take this harpoon and try to do other things with it that the game world, like they'll try to shoot it at towns and the game world won't, interact with that. And so that won't feel good. And so, and it was like, you know, they changed it to like an FPS briefly also, and they thought that didn't feel good. So they ended up cutting that as well. So it does seem like, you know, they tried a lot of things and eventually pared it back into like a more focused sort of experience, where you're just doing a couple of things.
And what's cozier than that?
Yeah.
Some more DLC coming, apparently.
Yes. They just instituted a photo mode. So you can go meet the photographer, and she will give you some things, extra little side quests to do. They put out like a roadmap of what they're doing, but I don't fully remember everything that they're doing. But they are apparently also going to put out some paid DLC, like one story expansion as well.
Some fun story stuff here. I won't spoil beyond what we've already talked about, but some interesting story developments.
Yeah, you also find these like messages in a bottle all around, from like a newlywed wife talking about her husband's fishing expeditions.
Yeah.
So clearly something's going on there as well.
Something. All right, are you ready just for a great mashup?
I'm ready.
Like, what's the multiplayer?
Competitive fishing.
Yeah. Like pro bass. I feel like these games do exist.
Yeah, there definitely are competitive fishing games for sure. But like battle fishing.
Okay. Tease that out a little bit.
Like you are trying to deplete your opponent's fish reserves on their side before they deplete your fish reserves.
Okay. A little bit, you know, we've talked about colonialism in games and the, you know, stickiness of that.
Sure.
Overfishing, not loving it.
That's fair. I'm thinking this would be more like war, right?
Right.
Not like two established countries.
Yeah.
Warring with each other. So still not good, you know.
Yeah.
But not,
no, I mean, it's fine.
Not really.
It's about
colonialism.
We'll live with it. Yeah, okay. You'd have to have teams, right? It's gotta be multiplayer. So
you could also set it at like, I mean, maybe these are bad too, but you could set it like an indoor fishing.
Okay, yeah. Something that's like not... We have to free the fish, right? Like, the fish could be freed.
Sure. You release your opponent's fish back into the wild.
Like, that won't be clear in the gameplay, but we can, like, the lore around it will be clear. That we're not punishing the fish. Like, the fish aren't at war. It's not their fault.
Right.
Unless we wanted to just do a battle thing where you play as a fish. All the champions are fish. Like, that's, like, scary fish.
Scary fish?
That's a possibility, too.
Underwater League? Possible.
Underwater League. That's probably already, like, the League is probably going to be like, are you the ones that bought the source code that was stolen when they hear this?
No, we did not. We don't have that kind of money. So they're only selling it for like 700,000.
Only?
Well, compared to what Riot makes.
No, I know.
Only.
Still don't have that kind of money.
No.
No, I like competitive fishing. You'd have to have teams, so it's like, okay, someone, right? Because you have people who play different fishing roles, right, for the different depths of fish.
Right. Yeah.
Now, the gameplay probably couldn't be just like fishing. It probably couldn't be fishing minigame, the MOBA.
Right.
But like somebody would be that. Like somebody's fishing thing that they did would just be like a timed input minigame. And that's where you'd put the person that you would otherwise yell at a lot. You would probably still yell at them a lot.
Yeah, you'd have to have, like a support role that somehow, like, replenishes your fish supplies or makes them harder to fish or whatever support roles do. So you wouldn't just have people fishing, you'd have people, like, trying to maintain your side of the recreational fish pond.
I think this is great. I think this could be the next League of Legends. I really do.
People love fishing minigames. They want,
I know.
They
So
wish to fish.
Let's capitalize on that.
Yeah.
So listeners, would you play a multiplayer fish arena? Multiplayer, a MOFA? MOFA's already a thing, isn't it?
I don't know. What is a MOFA?
I don't know. Well, yeah, I need to make it if I could make it a MOFO, that'd be pretty good. But I can't think of what the O would be. Multiplayer online fishing. Oh. Anyway, would you play our Battlefish game? Are you embarrassed by how little we know about League of Legends? Do you want to see more games in the fishing horror genre? If you have thoughts on this or anything else we talked about this week, hit us up on social media. We are on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and YouTube at Talk This Podcast. You can also visit our website, www.talkthispodcast.com, where you can learn all about the show, check out the games in the hat where I'm about to pull our next set of games from, and read our blog featuring long-running series Clickbait Boyfriend and Split Screen. Finally, and perhaps most importantly, if you enjoyed the podcast, you should subscribe so you never miss an episode on Sundays at noon. We are on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher. Oh, Stitcher's gone. Sorry, I spaced out. TuneIn, Spotify, Pandora Podcasts online and on the app, Overcast, Pocket Casts, wherever you can find podcasts. Subscribe to Talk This. Next week is Emma's side quest, which I'm sure is TBD. But what are we going to be talking about in 2 weeks?
In 2 weeks, our old game is going to be The Silver Case. And our new game is going to be Honkai Star Rail.
All right. I know very little about either of those, so it's going to be a learning experience for me. Emma's nodding mysteriously. Well, folks, that's it for this week's show. Thanks for listening. Emma, do you have a sign-off?
Do you have a sign-off?
Do I have a sign-off? Sure. This week, I hope that you challenge a spooky fish and win.